Snoop Dogg wasn't just topping the charts. He was fighting for his freedom. Behind the platinum records, blunts, and G-Funk beats, the man was facing a real murder charge. Not in a lyric, not in a movie, in a courtroom, with his life on the line. This is the story of how one of hip-hop's biggest icons found himself on trial for murder. How rap fame collided with a bullet, a body, and a justice system ready to make an example out of him. It was 1993. Snoop Dogg, born Calvin Broadus, was riding high. Discovered by Dr. Dre and featured heavily on The Chronic, he quickly became the new face of West Coast rap. But with that fame came constant attention, both good and bad. His lyrics about street life weren't just entertainment, they were reflections of the world he came from. Long Beach, California, where gangs, police, and survival were part of the daily grind. But nobody expected that his past would collide so violently with his future. On August 25, 1993, Snoop and his bodyguard, McKinley Lee, were involved in a deadly encounter in Palms, Los Angeles. The victim was a 20-year-old man named Phillip Woldemariam, allegedly a member of a rival gang. According to reports, Snoop and Lee were driving in a Jeep when they came across Woldemariam and his crew. Words were exchanged, tensions exploded, and then a shot rang out. Woldemariam was hit in the spine and later died from the injury. Snoop Dogg turned himself in a few days later and was charged with first-degree murder. He posted $1 million in bail and walked free, but the media storm was just beginning. Suddenly, the hottest rapper in America wasn't just a chart topper, he was an accused killer. The headlines were relentless. Murder was the case, a phrase that would become synonymous with the trial, was more than just a clever play on words. It was real, and it carried the weight of a possible life sentence. For prosecutors, this was a high-profile case that symbolized everything critics of gangster rap warned about: violence, crime, and anti-police rhetoric. They claimed Snoop was the driver, that the murder was premeditated, and that the weapon used in the shooting was found in his apartment. For the defense, it was clear self-defense. They argued that Woldemariam had threatened Snoop and Lee, even reaching for a weapon first. Snoop's legal team didn't play games. They brought in the best. Attorney David Kenner, who had already represented Death Row Records and had ties deep within the industry. Kenner painted a picture of Snoop not as a gangbanger, but as a man trying to escape his past while protecting himself from it. But as the trial dragged on, the pressure on Snoop was immense. Every appearance in court was a spectacle. Outside, fans chanted his name. Inside, prosecutors pushed the narrative that his lyrics weren't just art, they were confessions. This raised a larger question. Can an artist be judged by their work? Snoop's music was filled with gritty street tales, guns, drugs, death. But so was the world he grew up in. Was he glorifying that life, or was he simply reporting it? The line between reality and performance blurred, and the courtroom became the stage for a cultural debate as much as a legal one. Meanwhile, the prosecution's case started to unravel. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. The supposed gun found in Snoop's apartment couldn't be definitively linked to the shooting, and McKinley Lee, the bodyguard, testified that he fired the shot in self-defense, fearing for their lives. By early 1996, after 2.5 years of suspense, the jury reached a verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Snoop Dogg walked out a free man, smiling but solemn. The relief was obvious, but so was the weight of what he'd just been through. The trial hadn't just threatened his career, it nearly stole his future. Even after walking free, Snoop knew life wouldn't return to how it was before. The trial had changed everything. The public saw him differently. Labels, fans, and critics were split. Some celebrated his acquittal as a win for justice, while others viewed it as another case of a celebrity escaping consequences. But Snoop didn't try to run from what happened. He leaned into it. Later that year, he released the song "Murder Was the Case," a dark, haunting track that told the story of a man wrestling with death and the devil. It wasn't just a hit, it became a statement. He even turned it into a short film, blending fact with fiction, playing with the blurred lines between Calvin Broadus, the man, and Snoop Dogg, the myth. The murder case became part of his identity, but Snoop was determined not to let it define his future. Behind the scenes, though, things were falling apart. Death Row Records, the label that had launched him, was becoming a ticking time bomb. Suge Knight's reign of intimidation, the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, and Tupac Shakur's murder in 1996 sent shockwaves through the entire industry. Snoop was caught in the middle of it all, a survivor of both the streets and the system, trying to navigate a world that was eating its own. In 1998, Snoop finally broke away from death row and signed with No Limit Records, led by Master P. The move was symbolic. It marked a fresh start. He shifted his image, cleaned up his lyrics, and slowly started transforming from gangster rapper to mainstream entertainer. He kept rapping, but now he was also appearing in movies, commercials, and even cooking shows with Martha Stewart years later. Still, the trial followed him like a shadow. Anytime controversy stirred, whether it was an arrest, a diss track, or a public feud, people brought up the murder charge. It never really disappeared, but Snoop never denied it either. In interviews, he acknowledged what he went through, always careful with his words, always aware that the world was still watching. What made his story so unique wasn't just the charge, it was the comeback. Most people who face a murder trial don't walk out and land TV deals. They don't headline Super Bowl halftime shows, but Snoop did. He didn't just survive the system, he outgrew it. That's what makes this story so unforgettable. Here was a young black man from the heart of Long Beach with gang ties, a rap sheet, and violent lyrics, put on trial at the peak of his career. He stood before a jury that didn't just see a defendant. They saw an image, a symbol, a lightning rod for a national debate about music, race, and justice. And somehow he beat it, but not without scars. He lost friends, he lost peace of mind, and for a time he almost lost himself. But when the smoke cleared, literally and figuratively, Snoop Dogg was still standing. In many ways, the trial was a turning point not just for Snoop, but for rap as a whole. It opened up a legal and cultural can of worms. Prosecutors started citing lyrics as evidence. Police began watching rappers closer than ever, and artists began questioning how much of their truth they could safely share with the world. Snoop had been one of the first major artists to test that line and survive it. Over the years, he's become more than just a rapper. He's become a symbol of reinvention. A man who once faced life in prison now mentors youth, invests in tech, runs a youth football league, and has built a brand so powerful that even people who don't know his music know his name. But underneath the charisma, the catchphrases, and the celebrity status, there's still the memory of that trial. That moment when everything could have ended. And maybe that's why Snoop never stops working, never stops building, never stops moving forward, because he remembers how close he came to losing it all. This isn't just the story of a rapper who got famous and got in trouble. This is the story of a man who stared down a murder charge and walked out not just alive, but legendary. If you want more shocking, true stories behind fame and crime, subscribe now, because this is just the beginning.